Photoshop Senior Edition, folks. We're going to look at today making our own clouds, and we're going to look at a couple of different ways of doing that. Right here I've got less than a stellar image. I actually handed my camera off to somebody not too long ago and let them snap a photograph. Now you can't see any faces here, they're all blurred on purpose. But this is the 50-50 image, I call it. We got 50% ground, 50% sky. We're on a tilt, and we have a very boring sky. There aren't any clouds. We've got some blue in there, and we could richen that up with vibrance, but the problem is we just don't have any clouds in here. So that's the whole subject of this particular video. Let's make some clouds, okay? So let's start off by making a new layer in the layers palette. Now let's just bring the layers up so we can keep an eye on things. We need to change the colors over in the color picker. So let's click on the foreground color and go over here and find a nice rich blue. So you can see our first color, and let's click on the little double arrow so we can switch the background and the foreground colors, because we need to also change this white to a nice light blue. Let's get something way up there. So now we have a light blue, dark blue, and now we're going to go to filter, render, and clouds. Don't click on difference clouds, just on clouds, and we get this. Now, I could have gone a little darker with the blue, but you see what we've got. We've got white and blue, and that's what we want. Then we go to filter, blur, and we want motion blur. And you see we've got clouds, puffy clouds. And the idea is to move the slider on this particular motion blur filter to get the kind of cloud look that you want. That's too far over here. And then you've got to kind of try to figure out which of these gives you some nice clouds to work with. We're going to use a mask here in a minute to really fine tune this, but you got to kind of pull those around and decide, and I think those look pretty good. So now the next trick is we need to put a mask on this. So we go down here, and this is what I call the square donut. This is the mask. And it puts this white space right next to our newly created sky. And making our own sky gives us the ability, whenever we see a white sky, and all parts of the country sometimes, I believe, get white skies or cloudless skies. So those that paint or those that create photographs, sometimes you just need a few clouds to roll in. And this gives you the ability to do that. Now, number one, we don't need clouds over this, right? So what we can do is paint in the mask with the brush. So make sure that you either press the letter B as in boy, or go over in the left and click right on the brush tool. Make sure you have a nice soft brush, one of these. And I do have a lot of brushes open. That's because I clicked on the gear right up here and I loaded a bunch of these up. You don't have to do that. But click on a soft brush. Make sure the hardness is all the way to the left. The size isn't important right now, because you can go here and use the right bracket key to make it big, left bracket key to make it small. Make sure that the white brackets are around the mask, and you just begin painting. Make sure black is on top here in the color picker, and you see the fields start showing up underneath. Now, what we probably should do, instead of doing this over and over and over and over and over to get this to go away, we can go ahead and change this to 100%, and then just go ahead and get rid of that over the areas that we don't want clouds on to begin with. Okay. And then you see that's turned solid black over here. Now then, once you have that all gone, then switch this back to around 25 or 30%. Then once again, make sure the white brackets are around the mask, and then go back to painting. You want to bring some of that white out, and you want to have some of the blue. The more you click and paint, the more of the white is going to come out. And then you switch the color to white by pressing the letter X as in X-ray, and you paint again, and you start bringing back some of that blue. Now you should be starting to get the idea. Oh, now we're seeing the blue. Now we're seeing the clouds. Now it's making sense. Now I'm starting to like it. Now I'm happier. Okay. So you're still making decisions. You're still using photographic talents to decide how much of this is white, how much it should be going back into the background, how much of it shouldn't be there at all. Press X again to start bringing more of it back again. You just keep playing with it until you decide, that's exactly where I want my clouds to be. They're looking fantastic. Now, I'm going to press X again because some of that's just too heavy. And sometimes, to really tweak it, you got to take this down a little bit more. That's what gives you the fine tuning how this is going to look. And sometimes you've got to make your brush smaller. Left bracket key, right bracket key makes it bigger. And now I'm going to paint with black again. Bring some of the white back. Just in certain places. I want to kind of have a puffy one right in here. So it's your call. It's your, you decide. I'm going to lighten that up right in through there. Don't want those trees to have blue in it. Mix that a little bit right there. Okay, so I'm going to say that I like that. I'm going to turn that eyeball off so we can see where it is originally was, and that's what I've created so far. Now, if I think that blue is heavy-handed, obviously I can go up here to opacity and bring that down some. We can also leave that up, and let's just bring the layers back to where I usually have them. And we can go over here and change brightness, or we can click on color. If we want to make that a bluer blue, we can certainly change that. We can change the saturation. Now notice it's changing everything. If we click this box right here, it's only going to affect the layer directly below it. So I click that. Now when I run it up and down, it only affects the sky, which is the layer directly below it. So now the sky is much bluer, but we can also take the saturation down. Okay, and we can also change the lightness. Then if you say, okay, based on that, I probably need to bring some more of the blue back in. So you click back on the mask, and we want the white on top. So we start painting again, and you can change the opacity up here. Maybe even make the brush a bit bigger. So you've got all of those controls over the color, over the clouds, and so you can experiment until you feel really good about that. And you can also go up and change the opacity. And control it that way. So there's lots of ways to make that work for you. Combination of the mask, the opacity, and this color adjustment really give you control over making your own sky yourself. Now let's look at another thing altogether. Instead of having an image, we're just going to create our own sky, period. Let's say we have an 8x10 image, 300 pixels, and resolution 300, sorry. And we really need a nice background to work with. Well, we need to start with some qualities. And we can, if you remember the mountain image, we basically took clouds from one image, did a lasso around some good clouds, and copied them and brought them into another image, and you didn't know they were even there. Well, that's essentially what we're going to do with this creation. So I'm going to go to File, New, and this time we're going to set this up and call this New Clouds, and 8x10, 300 resolution. This is inches, not pixels. So everything else, if you want to create this and follow along, these are the dimensions, that's the profile. Click OK, and this is going to be a 20 meg file. Alright, so here we go, and and I messed it up. This should be a horizontal image. So I'm going to kill that and go back to File and New and make this a 10 by 8. That's better. Now let's do a Control-0 to make that fit. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a couple of layers. So I'm going to do another layer up here. I'm going to actually create 2 layers. I'm going to use the same blues that I had before because it really doesn't make a lot of difference. Excuse me. I'm going to do a filter, render, clouds up there. I'm going to go down here and do it again. Filter, and I can just click here, clouds. Now, if I turn that off, you can see immediately the difference in these two sets of clouds. So it proves what I said earlier. It will truly randomize those clouds. So if you're disappointed with the effect you get one time, turn around and run it again, because it will randomize the way the clouds are. Alright, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to turn that one off, and I'm going to go and do a filter, blur, motion blur on this set first. Okay, then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm not going to use that standard blur. I want to make sure that I get the best blur I can get. Alright, now what I'm going to do is experiment using these 2 layers in tandem. Basically, I'm going to play one layer against the other, or with the other, may be more accurate. So I'm going to put a mask on both layers, so click on the square donut on both of these layers. And then I'm going to turn this one off. Now, if you're doing this exercise with me, make sure this layer is filled with white. If white isn't already over here, if this layer isn't filled on yours, and white isn't over here, press D on your keyboard. And if now your colors are like these, you would fill that layer by holding down Control and hitting backspace. If you hit Alt backspace, it'll fill it with black, because black is on top. Alright. Now, what I'm going to do is go to the top, and I'm going to start painting the way we did earlier. Drop the opacity down around 25 to 30%, and I'm going to paint on the mask. So make sure the mask is selected, and I'm going to start painting here and there. And I'm going to do this through the whole image, because right now I don't know how much this image I'm going to need for wherever I'm going to use this. I may use this in several images, the same set of clouds. Now, if I save this as a PSD file, that's going to allow me to alter this cloud formation endlessly. If you look at this, I already have a pretty good set of clouds going right now, right? I mean, that doesn't look bad. Okay, now if I hit X, I can start bringing some more of the blue back in, just in the areas that I want it. Now then, the other layer. If I turn it on, you immediately see that wherever the black or the gray is, some of this layer with its pattern is going to show through the areas where it's black and gray. That's why you're seeing those changes. So what I'm going to do is turn this off, and I'm going to paint on this mask areas that I kind of like. But I'm going to paint with black first and make sure that's highlighted or selected with the brackets. And I'm going to start painting. Now, where this is going to match up with the other one, this is totally guesswork right now. There's a lot of clouds that I just painted in, right? So let's turn this one on. Now they're both one playing against the other. If I turn that off, you see how it's really making that one a lot more subdued. If I turn that off, these are a lot more popped, right? If I turn that on, it's subduing some spots. So let's see if I paint with white in some of these areas, what happens. Let's try painting more in. Now we've got a lot of clouds on the top layer now. So now the other layer under it is really making those clouds very, very strong. So let's, is really subduing them. If I turn that layer on, see, it's really, what I painted pretty heavily is now a lot more subdued. So let's highlight that one. Now here's where sometimes you get a real bonus. I'm going to change the the blend mode of this to overlay. That means this layer now is interacting with this layer differently based on color. Now let's try lighten. That didn't really change anything. Multiply. Changed it. But I don't know if it did for the better or not. Now all of these things could have a different effect. Let's try it with soft light on. Alright, let's paint again. I'm going to do this a little bit faster, because sometimes these will really have different effects. Let me see what we get. Not really much showing with that. Let me see what we get. Some of the others. Now look at it with multiply on. Oops. Multiply changed it in a hurry. Let's tone that down and bring that back just a little bit. So we didn't see drastic changes except till we came to multiply, but now watch what happens when we change the top layer blend mode, and let's change it on overlay. So you see it got a lot brighter, but we also have a blue-green mixing with the dark green. So let's tone the layer down a little bit, and now we're seeing a purple kind of come in there. Now let's see what happens when we paint on this layer. Let's switch to white. So I'm really taking some paint away. So now what it's doing is looking through it to this set of clouds. So let's change the mode to screen, and it's really, really white. So let's switch it to black. Let's go to multiply. So I've moved the layers, the top layer pretty much back to where it was. You can see my mask. I did switch the bottom layer to multiply. You can see I've got a lot of gray in there. And I also dropped the opacity to 44%, just playing around. So if I raise it up, you see there's not a lot of difference there. Now the one thing that I'd probably do to finish this off, there's a lot of clouds in here, but here's probably what I would do to finish this off. Now think in terms of, you know, you probably wouldn't use this whole thing for your clouds. You'd probably use part of it. Or think in terms of you've got 1/3 land and 2/3 is going to be your sky, or 1/3 of it, this is going to be your sky, for example. Now let's just say you're going to, well, let's just do it. I'm going to select both of these two layers with the clouds. So holding down my control key, I don't know if I've got something selected here or not. I'm just shift clicking on both layers. So got them both selected. I'm going to do a control T. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretty much pull both of these out. And I'm going to shove it all, well, first I'm going to move this inside to change the perspective. I'm going to shove the perspective all the way up here almost to the top. And then I'm going to hold down my control key and shove this whole thing up by a third. And then hit enter. So that's pretty much my clouds. So I could lasso those and put them pretty much anywhere. I should state you would do that if you wanted to put that into a painting. That way you kind of feather it and soften it and combine things for a nice soft painting effect. But you can see, you can select these clouds like this and put them wherever you want. I like the idea of running the clouds filter on its own layer within an image, and that way each time you come up with your own set of clouds for the occasion, so to speak. And the color, you can, if you've got some color in the clouds already, you can certainly match that color and have that variable each time, that you can have a slightly different more purplish or a more greenish color to it, darker, lighter, and so forth. So you have total control. The key is using the mask and watching that you don't go too far when you do the motion blur, and just really play with the mask, painting back and forth until you find the clouds to be just exactly where you want them to be. And it doesn't hurt also to do this, to find the occasional color that you like to throw into the image, and just, turn your paintbrush on, and maybe a really, really tiny amount, and put it on its own layer up above or so. Let's just put it in here in a couple of key spots. Obviously, if you put it in one spot, you have more control than putting multiple spots on one layer. You could put, blow paint over each layer, but for speed's sake, I'm going to do it just one layer. And just put kind of double up there, and then go to filter, blur, more motion blur work. We're doing a pretty hard blur already, and let's blur it a little bit more so that you can just barely see that there's some color there. And obviously we can just put the little square donut on there, and maybe a little more opacity, not a lot, and paint with black. And just, you only want people to say, is there some color there, or is it my imagination? And then maybe some another layer, and then maybe a yellow, and I didn't put a layer in, did I? Well, I don't know what I just did with the layer that I did make. Looks like I threw it away. Try that again. Yellow here, a couple of times there, a couple of times down there, and motion blur it. Actually, that did a pretty good job. Square donut. Let's try the other color again. For some reason, now it's not even showing my color in the color picker. So let's go another, there it is. So let's do another color. Let's do the red again, because I know I did it. So paintbrush, let's put some red there, red here, red down there. And let's blow it. Just, And away it goes, the square donut. Paint it a little bit. We don't want people to really know that it's going on. Maybe a little more opacity change there, a little more of a gotta be actually select that. It's there. Okay, so I like blowing a little bit of color in. You don't want it to make it look like an Easter egg in the sky or anything like that. You don't want to overdo it. And obviously we can always take the opacity down of the layer a little bit because it's on its own layer, so we can control that there. But sometimes I think it just makes a little more vibrance up in the clouds. Certainly doesn't hurt anything. All right, I've talked too long. This should have been a much shorter video, but anyway, here it is, making your own clouds. Talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.